I am originally from Snellville, Georgia. Like I graduated from a school in Gwinnett County.
And what was it like growing up in your hometown?
I think it was kind of a basic suburb. I didn't really think a whole lot of it really until I moved somewhere that is extremely different from there. But Gwinnett County is a massive county with lots of people and lots of schools, and it was not a small town, and now it is even less of a small town. And people who live down here think of it as Atlanta. So generally I say that I'm from Atlanta, but my memories of living there is really not like what I know Atlanta to be, because it was a suburb and we had a big yard and all that. So it was just kind of a basic life, I feel.
What kind of kid would you describe yourself as in high school?
I was nerdy. I was a horse girl. And I think we all, like, I embrace the humor around that now because there's so many jokes online about horse girls. And although at the time it was not funny, but also I was just a little bit of kind of like a quirky, gifted type kid, like that kind of nerdy kid. So I didn't care that much up until like high school, but I definitely was a horse girl. When you think about that, jokes about horse girls, like that was very much who I was, like I said, until high school. And then I joined band, which didn't do a lot to help. So then I was a band girl and also a horse girl. So that pretty much whatever you think of when you think of that, that was about how I was. I was a good student, but not like a super scholar, fantastic student, but like an honor roll type. I think I was like in the top 10% of my class kind of student. I was friends with the valedictorian group, but I wasn't ever really in that hunt because I was just kind of like my own thing or whatever. But yeah, definitely not super athletic. I did marching band, which is, in my opinion, a sport, and it is very athletic. And I rode horses, which is also a sport. But as far as your general, like what you picture of athleticism, that was not me. So yeah, the grown-up horse girl, and I'm still kind of like that. But one of the good things about getting older is that you learn to just be fine with it and embrace that. So yeah.
So you still ride horses today?
I do. I have a horse. I do have 2 kids, so I don't really have a lot of time, but it's really the only thing that I like to do that is something that I like to do. So I really think that you should keep doing the things that you like that are important to you. So I do kind of piddle around with still riding and trying to go to horse shows when I have time, and just because I can't think of what else I would do that would make me happy. So I still do it.
What path did you decide to take after high school?
So I went to the University of Georgia, and I always kind of knew I was going to do that. My mom found this journal that I had answered a question. Like, you go in and you do morning work sometimes, and they have this journal question, and it was like, what do you want to do and why? And I said I wanted to go to the University of Georgia and ride on the equestrian team and be a teacher because I thought I'd be good at it. And I did all of those things. So I went to UGA, and then when I got there, they had an equestrian team at UGA, and I happened to be there right at the right moment when the equestrian team at UGA was shifting from a club sport to an NCAA sport. So I was able to basically walk on as a varsity athlete at the University of Georgia, which was very cool. But at the time, I didn't even realize how cool. And I did major in education, although I actually did start as a psychology major, but then I changed it. So I did come out doing exactly what I said I was going to do in like 7th grade.
What made you change from psychology?
Really, what it was that I have psychologized about myself later is that I think I had a little bit of anxiety about not knowing what I was going to do when I finished. And so I try to tell my personal kids now that you should not do that. Not that I regret my path, but you don't have to know what you're going to do when you're 18. But I really couldn't. I had a hard time moving forward without being able to see what you do if you study psychology. Like, it's something that I'm interested in, but what am I going to do with it? And so I ended up just going back to teaching, which does involve a lot of psychology, it turns out, but you don't get paid as much as you probably could if you were some kind of private psychologist. But basically, I think that was it. I've thought about that over the years, and the only thing I can come up with is that one of my parents probably said, well, what are you going to do with that? And then I just ended up going to education. So,
And so do you remember what exactly made you want to become a teacher?
um, no, like, I hate to say that thing in seventh grade where I was like, I think I'd be good at this. Like, I thought I'd be good at it. I like watching people figure stuff out, kind of along that same line of psychology. I like watching people learn. I like when people get it. I also, like I said, I was real nerdy. So like, I saw this meme online that said something like, kids are really cool because you never get to talk about your favorite dinosaur with the grown-ups, but like kids, like this year I'm teaching science. And so, just talking about weird facts about, freshly discovered vertebrates that live in the ocean, like things like that are just interesting stuff. And watching kids learn, it's all very interesting to me. I don't know. So I will say my job does not really feel like work most of the time. When I'm just with the kids, it just feels like I'm showing people stuff and watching them figure it out.
And so you said you teach science right now.
Yes.
What other subjects have you taught in your time as a teacher?
I have taught pretty much everything. I've taught first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, and fifth grade now. I was the gifted program teacher for like 8 years. So that is where obviously you have a group of identified gifted and talented students. And usually that involves all the grades, like a mixed group. So we cover all the subjects when I did that. But this year I came back to the classroom. So when I came back to fifth science, that kind of wrapped up my whole, I've taught everything from first to fifth thing. I've been mostly a math teacher throughout most of those other grades. I was like math or a combination of math, science, and social studies. And I just found out next year I'm going back to teaching math, which I like, even though I do enjoy the science talks. Trying to be a really good science teacher, like a Miss Frizzle style science teacher, is a lot. And there's a lot of learning you have to do. And it's been kind of harder than I thought it was going to be, where I feel pretty comfortable teaching math. So I'm kind of looking forward to going to something that I feel like I'm going to do a good job at, even though I'm not real mathy and I was not a real strong math student. I have had really good test scores and really good success with teaching math. So I'm looking forward to that too. And I know I'll still get to have those conversations with the kids, just not as their teacher who is responsible for their science grade, which might be more fun.
And how many years have you been teaching so far?
I just figured this out. I think this is year 18. It's either 17 or 18. Now I'm backing up again on that. I don't know. Unfortunately, after about like the first 10, it's kind of a blur. And then I assume the last 10, I'm going to know exactly how long I have left, but I'm in the in-between right now.
Just a long time.
Yeah, it's a while.
One of the things that I have noticed going into adulthood is that a lot of people have a lot of unresolved like childhood problems. And I wanted to ask, as a teacher, you probably get to see it a bit more in the young kids especially. Do you feel kind of helpless to help them if they have like a kind of bad home life?
I mean, I think you're helpless to a degree. I think that, it's interesting because right now I think as a country, I guess, as a population, one of the things I like about like the Gen Z kids, I think, is that y'all are all very in touch with those types of things. Like people joke about the trauma and that they're triggered and all of this, but I think it's super interesting to look and see why are we the way that we are. Because I don't think I had an ideal childhood, now compared to some of the things that happen to children that I know of. Yes, I had a pristine, wonderful childhood, but nobody's childhood is perfect. My parents were not rich. They got divorced when I was like 21. So even though my memories of it are fine, turns out there was a lot going on behind the scenes that I didn't either pick up on or I blocked out or whatever, that, it wasn't ideal. And so all of us have things that we have to overcome, but it does all of that shape you into who you turn out to be. So I think one of the things I hope that I am doing by trying to build relationships with these kids is to teach them that you are your own person and that you make your own decisions. And so for a lot of those things, I still like to think that you can help them get past it. I don't want to say like pull yourself up by your bootstraps or whatever, because privilege is definitely a real thing. And some people are going to have a leg up that others are never going to have, but you can make it as good as you can make it with what you've been given, I guess.
During your time teaching, 18 years, right? Has a lot changed in that time since you started with with like technology and just culture?
Yes, everything's changed. Although it's funny because some things come back around, and that was when I realized that I was becoming like an old teacher. Is when, like, well, first of all, when I can now be teaching with people that I taught, which is, talk about traumatizing. But other than that, the stuff that I learned in college, like the style of teaching, I still remember that when I went to my very first interview, I botched a question on something called learning focused schools, which if you're a teacher and you're watching this, you know what that is. And we had not talked about that because it's a program that you purchase, right? So, but the basics of the program is research-based, so it's good teaching. So anyway, I botched that question and I ended up not getting the job, but then it's a long story. But anyway, I fixed it, and so I ended up getting the job. Well, this year, my school went back to being a learning focused school. Like, it's been 20 years, and that program has come back around as the pinnacle of good teaching, which it actually is, and it is supported by research, so I'm fine with it. But when they started talking about it, and I'm looking around the room, and there's teachers who are like 26, 27, who've never heard of this, I realized that I was old because I was here long enough. And I remember when I first started, and I don't remember what the thing was that happened, but one of the older teachers was like, yep, I've done this before. It just had a different name then. And now that is me. So yes, everything has changed, but a lot of it has stayed the same because ultimately what helps kids learn is very similar, like as far as how to introduce things and then how much time you spend teaching before you let them do it and prove what they know. And then the use of assessment, all that's research-based, but the ways that we do it have changed a ton. I really like technology in the classroom. Even though when I started, I had a, what do you call it? An overhead projector was like the technology. And then later, we kind of eased in, because I've always been at kind of poor districts. So I think even when I started, people had smart boards. I did not have anything that was like a smart classroom board for the first several years. But I was always kind of like an early adopter of the technology. And I had a memory pop up the other day of using iPads in the classroom and how it was the most exciting thing just to get like 5 and then a whole class set that you could check out and use. And I was always, like I said, one of the people trying to be like, what can the kids make with this? How can we do this? And now it's funny because we don't really use iPads that much. That turned out to not be a huge impact, which is weird to me because I really liked them and I would still use a class set of iPads if I had them, but we've gone more to a smart board type situation. And then now we're like one-to-one Chromebooks. And I like it. I like to use the technology for the kids to create things, but I have realized that I'm in the minority. And for the most part, a lot of that technology, not to go off on like a rant here, but all it does is replace a pen and pencil. It is not being used in the way that I think it should be used, which would be for the kids to learn how to be innovators and them make something with the technology.
Have you noticed that technology that the kids use like at home, like smartphones or the internet, has that made them not dumber, but
yes.
a little, is it harder for them to learn concepts than when you had students that didn't have access to all this?
Oh, we were just talking about this in the car on the way over here. So this is more of that psychology thing. Not to be, I think a lot of people would hear stuff like this and think it sounds judgy, but like definitely being on a screen from the time that you're a baby is going to change your brain. And you cannot convince me differently because I see it in the kids, but also there's more and more research coming out about it now. And because I was the gifted teacher, I would read up on gifted things. But one of the things that comes up a lot when you start looking into giftedness is like the connection between giftedness and ADHD and autism and all of these things. And a lot of it is biological in your brain, but I also think we can affect it with the technology use. So no, it's not making them dumber, but I do think it's making it harder for kids' brains to engage in things that are not like a dopamine hit, like looking at a screen. Having technology in your life from when you are tiny does not make you good at technology. And that's actually what we were talking about in the car. that there is a big difference. And I don't really know what makes some kids one way and some kids the other, but like my own kid is into video editing and things like that. But he actually wasn't that much of an iPad kid as far as being like really, you see kids that are like fixated on their device and things can be going on around them and they are not seeing it because they are so fixated. And my kids weren't really like that. But there are kids who are like that. And I think sometimes parents see that and they think that means that they're going to be a computer programmer or whatever. And sometimes they probably do that. But I think for a lot of them, it's more about the zoning out that they get from being on that. Like they just are really into the game. They are not going to transfer that into like, oh, I want to make a game. I want to be that. I don't know that there's a lot of connection. And it's weird to me the number of kids, considering that a lot of, like I said, probably about half my kids have a cell phone already as fifth graders. And a lot of them have cell phones and tablets of their own. And a lot of them have TikTok accounts and Snapchat and all of these things. And I think a lot of their parents think that they are very, technologically savvy or whatever. But when their computer messes up, I have to teach them how to turn the internet off and turn the internet back on to troubleshoot it. And I have to tell them to shut it down and that is the first thing you do with any technological device that doesn't work. Power it off, unplug it, wait a minute, plug it back in and turn it back on. And most of the time it fixes itself. But like they don't even know that, much less how to like go into the settings and see if they can, figure anything out. And it's wild because you want to think that they know. And then that, as a teacher, that leads me into what else do these parents assume that they know? And this year I have realized that a lot of parents assume that their children know not to talk to people on the internet. And they do not know that. These kids, I don't want to generalize, there's probably a few, but the vast majority of them truly believe that the people that comment on their TikToks are other kids. And, as an adult, we know that probably most of them aren't.
Has school safety changed during your time teaching? Thoughts about safety?
Yeah, actually, it's funny. I said to Sam, when you asked me what room number was my room, and I didn't even realize there were numbers on the outside of the building. But my first thought was that is not good, because that means if you've ever even been in the office and you happen to hear them say the number of a classroom when they go to dial it to check the kid out, then you know what room is the room for the kid you want to kidnap or shoot or whatever. So that gives you an idea of how much school has changed since I was a kid, since any adult was a child, that is an immediate thought, that we should not have anything outside the building to help somebody find a child. You probably noticed when you drove around the blue fence that we have that's like a privacy fence to keep people from being able to see, because you don't, and even my husband was like, people, it's pretty obvious if you pull up to the fence to talk to the kids. Yes, it is. But people would still do it. And most of them are doing it innocently because this is a small town. And it's probably just really, truly somebody who knows the kids and is just waving at them or whatever. But you can't look at it like that now. You just have to make sure that there's no way for anybody to learn a routine of a school. And they're always coming up with stuff like they have the privacy fence. They tinted our windows, which I don't like for mental health reasons, but it is so that people can't see in if they're walking around outside the building. It's just, there's a lot. There's a lot.
Are you worried about school safety more so now than you did when you first started?
I don't know if I worry about it, but I am definitely more aware. Like I said, when you said there were numbers outside, that was the first thing I thought of, was that, because that's just how we're trained now. So because of, this is one of those things where even though I grew up in the suburbs, and sometimes because of the size of the schools here and the amount of opportunities, I kind of wish that I lived in a more suburban or urban area. But when it comes to things like school safety, I am very glad that I live here, because I do kind of think that even though it is important for us to think through the possibilities and always be, paying attention, I think that I'm not me personally, do I think something is going to happen here? Probably not. Nothing that wouldn't be contained in the front office because of the procedures that we have. That was one good thing about COVID, honestly, is that after we came back to school after COVID, we weren't letting anybody in the building. And it was because of COVID and the, protocols for health. But some people have picked up on this, that we never went back to that. Like the first day of school, you're not allowed to walk your kid to class anymore. And that was because of COVID, but we never brought it back. And the reason why we never brought it back, I mean, I don't really know the official reason, but I know the reason I'm glad. It's because we don't know who is walking these kids into the building. There's no way to check in hundreds of parents on the first day of school. And it just, I like it, and I hope it never comes back. And I know there's been some parents who kind of now want it to come back because they've kind of caught on that we never brought that back. But I hope that they will understand why we do it that way. It's because we all know who we are on the first day of school. And usually, you might notice teachers usually dress the same on the first day of school. And all of that is because we want to make sure that the kids are getting in and getting out with the right people. And the best way to do that is to not let anybody in. And it's funny because years and years ago, there would always be people in the buildings, just parents and volunteers and everybody. And we do still let volunteers in, but they meet with the counselors and go through a little training deal, and they always have their little badge on, so you know who they are. And now, where it used to be, you would just pass a person in the hallway. And now, like, if a person ever does make it into the building, it is immediate that people are asking who they are and what they're doing there, because that's how much they stand out in this day.
I've always wondered, do teachers ever have a mental health crisis in terms of, like, especially with the recent, shootings and things like that? And I know dealing with kids can be really probably draining. And obviously, like you mentioned, teachers don't get paid as much as they should. Do teachers have resources to sort of help them with that, or do you guys kind of lean on each other? What's that like?
Yeah, I think teaching is one of the most mentally draining jobs, especially if you let it be. No, there's not a whole lot of resources, although we did just get an email a couple weeks ago about how we get some type of telehealth counseling for free with our insurance, and our boss was letting us know. We joke a lot about how teachers are either like prayed up or medicated or like functioning alcoholics, because you can't just be a regular person and do this every day. It is disturbing to me how many teachers are on mood stabilizers. I think teachers, these last several years has been a real shift in how teachers are looked at. And a lot of it is political, but it's weird because I feel like it comes from both sides of the political spectrum. So it's not that one particular political group hates teachers more. They actually both seem to hate teachers, but for very different reasons. And teachers are just over here trying to teach. And so there's a lot of that too, And then, yes, coming back to work after COVID was hard on a lot of people. I think there was a lot of fear. There was also a lot of that same, like, too bad, this is your job. You should have been considered an essential employee from the beginning. I think the mental health stuff was from before that. It's just kind of like how I said earlier, this generation, this time period, we're more aware of mental health issues. I think it's probably always been hard to be a teacher because you can't really be a good teacher if you're not like emotional a little bit about it and you're not sharing yourself with your students, One thing, like, I hate to say that you have to like make it like a job and leave it, because you really can't when you're thinking about the kids. But there's also a lot of rule type things that really have nothing to do with children that also wear it down. That's one difference between now and teachers of like 50 years ago who pretty much just were teaching. But now we have the standards and the tests and all of this accountability that really is very fake. Like, I'm not opposed to testing at all to see if kids know what they're supposed to know. Like, I'm actually fine with it. Although some of it is probably because that's all that I've ever known. I've never known a teaching where we just get to say if the kids know it. But all of the heavy accountability that gets put on the teachers because of that is not good for anybody. And at some point you have to let that part of it go. Like, I don't really let go the parts that deal with the kids when I go home. But when it comes to the scores and that pressure that I know really doesn't have much to do with the kids, I am learning in my second half of my career to kind of like let that kind of stuff go. I'm also trying to let go of like any kind of like ladder climbing, whatever, like, I don't want to say ambition. I'm still ambitious, but you can't focus on those types of things. You really just have to focus on being an old school teacher, coming to school, teaching the kids, reaching them as best you can, and trying to do the best you can with them. And then I think what bogs a lot of teachers down is those other things that unfortunately are controlled by people that are not teachers. So you just have to kind of let that go, which I will say I'm very fortunate. You mentioned leaning on other teachers. I love this building that I work in. I love the teachers here. I've taught, not in a lot of schools, I've taught in 3 different schools, and I really like this building. And there's a lot of reasons that I could go into for why, but one of them is the coworkers. This is kind of a weird building to work in as far as elementary goes, and the teachers who stick it out here are like just a different type of teacher to me. I don't know. So yes, we lean on each other a lot. I love being around the people, even though some of them are not like my personal friends outside of work. It's not like I'm working with all of my best friends, even though some of them have become my best friends, but it's just a different kind of group, and we get along good, and it does help lift you up.
What's something about teaching that most people don't know about?
Like everything. Everything. I know my husband, like, he's a supportive husband and everything, but I really think that he thinks that my job is easy still. Even listening to me talk about it, I think he thinks he could do it. And not like he couldn't do it. I mean, he could, a lot of people could be teachers, but it's a lot harder than what you think, and not in the ways that you necessarily think of it. But like, you have to plan every minute of these kids' day. And if you have one that is a little bit smart or a little bit bad, you have to plan like twice as much, because you have to be ready when they're done or when they're over or whatever they're going to do. And there's a lot of them. But beyond that, the paperwork, the proving that you're doing your job is insane in teaching. Like, I saw this thing online, and I think it was just a meme, so it's probably not true, but it was talking about the number of decisions that teachers have to make in a day. Like, because I guess an example would just be like, say you've been talking for 5 minutes about some topic. You have to know at that moment that you better figure out if they're with you or not. Like, and so what are you going to do then? And what are you going to do if your plan was for them to have it after that 5 minutes, and then you check and it is clear that they have no idea what's happening? Like, what are you going to do then? And how are you going to, just those, it's just tiny little decisions that I feel like a lot of jobs don't make in a day, because it's just you doing your tasks that you were supposed to do. But when you're teaching, your tasks depend on all these other people who have wildly different plans for what their day was going to be like, and their brains are all different. It's very exhausting mentally for not really being that exhausting physically. And I just think people just have no idea. It's just a very different type of tired, I guess, that you get. I will say though, I am not a big defender of like, people like to joke about teachers, how they have like months off in the school year, which I'd like to point out, you do not get 3 months off. Everybody always says you get 3 months off. We have to work until Memorial Day. We actually have to come back after Memorial Day. So that is solidly the entire month of May that we're working. We do get off June and July, but I believe this year we have to come back in July. So it is not even 2 whole months off. Thank you very much. But we do get off and everything. But I don't ever try to convince people of why they shouldn't say anything about that, because yes, you should be jealous, because I feel that I have earned every bit of that time.
If you had to give advice to your students now for when they become adults, what are some, I guess, life lessons that you want to instill in them?
I have some kids who I don't know that they're in the kind of homes that are guiding them in the way they need to. So I do try to impart a little life lesson here and there, even though generally I do think teachers should teach, and they should build relationships to the point that they make the kids want to learn, but they shouldn't get too personal with kids, because that's a parent's job. However, I do try to give them little bits of advice. But really what I try to tell them is the same kind of stuff like I talked about earlier with why I chose my degree. I tell my own kids, do what you like to do. Find something that you like to do and try to figure out a way to make that into a job. Study something that you're interested in studying, and, try to find something that you want to work on. Now, is that to say that you should turn your absolute passion into a job? Maybe not. Like, I really like horses, but I figured out pretty early that I didn't want that to be part of my career, because I didn't ever want to feel like I had to do that, because that would ruin it for me if I knew I had to do it. So, and then let's see, what other life advice? Always try to keep going, like keep learning something, keep doing something, even if you can't get out, like you want to leave your small town, but you can't get out. There's still ways to find an opportunity to do things.
Yeah, you mentioned that some of the kids that you taught early on are now sort of grown up now. Have you been in contact, keeping up with a lot of them? Would you say you're proud of your students from
yeah.
them?
Yeah, I'm proud of pretty much everybody that I have seen. I think they all have gone to school. We talked about one of them, and you obviously are doing well. I love to hear most of the ones that I've kept in touch with have done some type of school or some kind of training after school, because that's really what is important. I do think everybody should try to go do something after graduation, not necessarily college, but just something to, once they figure out the thing they want to do, like go get better at that thing that you want to do. And all the ones I've kept up with pretty much have done that. And the ones that I see around here are all super nice and just turned out good. Like I said, unfortunately though, there's some I've lost track of and I worry why that is, but I hope that it's because they've just moved far away and they're just out there.
And so you mentioned that your oldest son is in high school now. I was curious, what are your thoughts on what the younger generation's dating life is like right now?
Oof. Well, actually, I don't know. In some ways, this is one of those things where kids, not we, they all know way more than I did when I was their age. And I think that is equally a good thing and a bad thing. Like, in a good way, like my son thinks about things that I never thought of when I was in high school in a good way. Like, as far as, what to do on a date. What does it mean to be dating versus talking versus exclusive? Like, we never really had those conversations when I was in high school, like that I can remember me thinking it, which might have been because, like I said, I was kind of weird and nerdy, but I don't remember that being much of a thing. But also, we didn't really have all the technology options that we have now. But I do think these kids are a little more mature in their thinking about what they want out of a relationship and what it means to be in a relationship versus single or whatever's in between relationship and single. But then on the other hand, you have kids seeing absolutely horrifying, explicit materials that I personally believe do something to your brain that you should not see until you are older.
Well, as I've talked to a lot of people in their young adult years about sort of love and stuff, they comment that a lot of people, when they get older, get in what's called a situationship, which is where you date someone, but you're not exclusive. And I've noticed that seems like it's something that's been a trend among like Gen Z, I think, as they've sort of gotten into adulthood. And I wonder where that has come from, if it's from the expectations from movies and TV shows, but then also the internet and like social media and stuff. Do you have any theories on that?
Yeah, I could see that. I feel like I'm a, what do you call it? A Oregon Trail generation or whatever, a Zennial, where my birth year is kind of millennial, is at the very beginning of the millennials, right? So like, I grew up the early years, no internet, no computer, no whatever, and then now I've had it. So, but I think a lot of that situationship stuff comes from all of the communication ways that we have now. Like, you do not have to have any level of commitment to communicate with somebody these days. And whereas, which before my time, really, like the Gen X days, you had to, it was a commitment to even like communicate with a girl or a boy you liked outside of school. Like, because you had to call their house and somebody else might answer. And then they might want to know who you are. Like, her dad might know who you are before you ever even like, you don't even know each other yet, but her dad's gonna know your name because you had to call her house. Like, and it's very like, you have to have a certain level of commitment right there from the beginning to even call. And now you don't have to do that. You can kind of be in a relationship that is very easy because it's all text. You don't even have to like stop what you're doing during the day to work on a relationship. But that's not gonna be like a real relationship until you get to that point where you're like, you're taking time out of your day to commit to that person. But I think that's where the lines can blur. And even like, when I was in college, by the time I was in college, we had phones, we could text, even though it was still slower than today. We didn't have Facebook on our phones and all that kind of stuff, but we had Facebook. And like, I was in that first group. Facebook came out for those of you who are a lot younger than me. Facebook came out, I think, in 2004, and I went to college in 2001. And so that was also the first time I had high-speed internet, was when I moved into the dorm, and then I got AOL Instant Messenger. And so between AOL Instant Messenger and then Facebook, you had to have a college email to get Facebook for the first, I don't know how many years. And so it was all college students. And you could communicate a little bit through that, and then you had Instant Messenger. And so like, I still remember when I was dating or whatever, it was not a situationship necessarily, because that word didn't even exist, obviously, and we didn't have that. But it was weird even then, because I had been texting my now husband. We texted back and forth, trying to kind of meet up, and we talked a little bit, and then we were friends on Facebook, and we had gone out to eat a few times, and we'd done a few things. I don't really remember. And he had asked me if I wanted to come home to meet his family at Thanksgiving, and I was kind of like I think I said no. But shortly after that, we were going to go out, and I can't remember how it came up, but I was like, I said something about his Facebook relationship status. And that is how we became dating, was because he changed his Facebook relationship status first. And that was like how I knew that I had a boyfriend, was from that. And I feel like just from there, think about how far we have come with all of the technology things and things like that, that now the lines are so blurred. And even me, like that was like, what, 2004 or so, 2005-ish? We were already using technology to confirm. Like my husband didn't even have to say, do you want to go steady, or whatever people used to say in like, whatever, the 90s. And so just that was different than probably how, anybody, our parents or whatever had done it. And now you have these things where you're just constantly connected online, and you can have an entire relationship for months before you ever get to the point where you're physically face to face with somebody. And then I don't even know how you would go about now asking somebody like, am I your girlfriend? Because people don't do that. I'm sure it's even more fluid now than it was then. So I think that's how people get caught up in like a situationship, because they never really define it, but you know a lot about this person and you talk to them 24/7 because you're connected to them. But then also that makes it very easy to end it, because you can just send them a text and be like, this is it. And then you're not in one anymore, and you don't even know, like, I don't know. It is hard, but it really blurs the lines, and it makes it hard to see like, what is the status of this relationship? It would be very confusing. This is why I'm just going to stay married too. I don't want to get involved.
How long have you been married for?
17 years. 7. Yeah, it'll be 17 years. Kind of like the teaching thing. A while, but not long enough to get like a 20th anniversary present.
Do you have any advice for the younger people that are looking for long-lasting love? Because that's also a thing. As I've interviewed other people, they've mentioned that it seems really hard to find someone that wants a long connection. Like, what do you think? What do you think that you did right?
Ugh. It would be easier to say all the things that we have done wrong. I do think you should not stay in a relationship that makes you unhappy. And I think that's, in some ways it's a good thing that there are people who don't have as much lasting relationship, because if you are just looking for a lasting relationship, you may not be that happy in the end. I think, there's a difference between a relationship that lasts and just a marriage that lasts, or a commitment because you're stuck together. So I fully support people splitting up if they're going to be better off. I think one thing that we probably did well was we both went to school. We both had jobs that we liked. And I know that doesn't, I think fighting about money and bringing outside stress into your relationship is like one of the biggest killers of the relationship, even if has nothing to do, like my husband and I do not have the same job, so you would think it wouldn't matter, but it does. When you're stressed about work and you bring that home, you're going to be irritable. Like, it's just, and then if one or both of you, like if you can't support the life that you started together financially, you're going to fight constantly. Debt makes people stressed. Whether you are happy together in debt or not, you're still just going to be so stressed. And that's also when it starts to look better to just get out. So, I think I am, not like we did it on purpose, I guess. We got married on purpose. But we both are pretty secure. We made good financial moves, I guess, kind of. I mean, we're broke. Don't get me wrong. We both work for the state of Georgia, but like, but we lived within our means, I guess you could say. So I think we don't have as much to be stressed about. So all we have to do is work on each other. And also my husband is a very good like parental partner. I think that's important. Like if somebody doesn't want kids and you want kids, get out. You're not going to change your mind. You're not really going to change your mind about anything, really. But that's a big one. If your partner doesn't want to be, expects kind of like a housewife situation or like somebody else going to take care of the kids and they're going to work, you got to work all that stuff out because they're not really going to change their mind that much. Like there's people who talk about like 7 years into a marriage is like the hardest time, which I think is true whether you're married or not. Any like long-term relationship, they say about 7 years. I personally think that it is the age when your kids start to become involved in things. Like when they go to school and then you have like lunches and this meeting on this day and this t-ball thing on this day and this homework on this day. The reason I think it came to be the 7-year mark is because usually that is about how long you've been married when those things happen. But I think if you have your kids earlier in the marriage or later, it's still going to hit you at that same time because that is when your life stops being about what you want and it starts being about these little people that you have. And so I do think that people who live the dink life probably I don't know what would make them get divorced because to me, that was the hardest years was when your kids keep you super busy. But if you can make it through that part and then you realize like, no, we're committed. We're going to have a family together forever. Then it starts to really pick back up and then you're just like nagging each other over stuff. But ultimately, you've already been through those times and made that decision. It's almost like you have to keep reaffirming that you want to be there. And if you ever truly cannot reaffirm that you want to be there, then it's really time to start looking at getting out. But I think sometimes people don't really think all the way through it the way that you probably should, because marriage is a big deal and splitting up is a big deal. And even if you're not married, anytime you're committed to somebody, like you live together or whatever, you follow them somewhere, go with them, it's a big deal.
Do you have any regrets in your life?
I'm an anxiety overthinker. I'll regret this as soon as we're done with it. But no, not really. No, like serious major regrets. I don't think so. Sometimes I wish I had waited longer to get married and move, but not because I regret getting married. But we were talking about this before you started recording me. Like when I look back, I think I was a baby when I was getting married. But then just this weekend, I figured out that I was 24 when I got married, which to me does sound a little bit like a baby still, but really that's a plenty fine age. Like if somebody else was 24 and was getting married, I'd be like, oh, okay. Like it's not like you're a teen bride or anything. But in my mind, now looking back on how just little, I was just so dumb. Like I didn't know anything. And I'd been a teacher for a whole year. Like it wasn't like I was, I was a full adult and my husband was 26. He was more of an adult. And I still just think I was so young. Why was I in such a hurry? And so part of me kind of regrets that we didn't like stick around in Athens or something for a little bit longer before we moved down here. But then I also fully acknowledge that my husband could not find a job dealing with his degree where we were living. So it would have meant him still working at a parts store instead of doing the job that he truly wanted, which he got down here. So it all works out. But it's more like things that I wish that we had, done. I kind of wish, I had embraced the like weird horse girl thing at a younger age instead of waiting until I was older. But I also think that's part of like your 30s and into your 40s is when you go back to all the things that you liked before because you don't care anymore what people think about it. But I think if everybody had that energy a little earlier, you'd do better in relationships, not just with like romantic relationships, but just your friend group and just all of that. If you just kind of do what you like to do and don't worry about everybody else, it would work out better. But I don't have like any deep like regrets or anything. I've had a good life for sure.
And what would you say is the most important lesson you've ever learned in your life?
Oh gosh, that's a deep question. This is where I said I wouldn't be interesting enough because I've had a pretty good life. Like nothing. I feel like those kind of like really most important lessons come from things that are very traumatic. I think that one thing that's important, you can make yourself into whoever you want to be. Like if you don't like the personality that you have, you can make yourself act like the life that you want to have, kind of thing. I've tried to tell myself that as a parent, like be the parent that I would have wanted to have, basically, you know, be the kind of teacher that I would have wanted to have, be the kind of friend that I would want to have. Like, not necessarily saying change your whole personality, but think about who you are and what you're like and be the person that you would want you to be if you had to like interact with you. And if you've made a mistake or whatever, like just move on, you know, don't let it be the end of the world. As somebody who's like kind of an anxious overthinker, sometimes I get stuck thinking about stuff like that, but you can't. You just, every day is different. Like you just gotta keep going.
Okay, Cristina, thank you for sharing your thoughts with us today. It was great talking to you
Thank
again.
you. This was not that bad.